Thank you for joining me today for a walk in my garden. I'm Liz Davey, and you're watching A Walk in the Garden on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television. We're starting out in my herb garden. It's a really hot day in July, and the herb garden is at its best. The best time to pick herbs is early in the morning, and most of what we're doing in the herb garden is picking herbs at this time of the year. It's really too late to fertilize them. They have already put on their growth for the year. The only things that you might want to continue fertilizing would be some of the annual herbs. That would be parsley, basil, and the scented geraniums that I've put in. But most of the time I'm just doing some harvesting. And today we're going to be using some of the herbs from the garden in our cooking segment. And I will be using thyme, and I have some lemon thyme that I'll be using. This one is just a regular thyme. I find the best way to cut herbs, rather than pulling them off or trying to snap them off, is to use a pair of scissors and just have something to collect the herbs in. The other thing that I'll be using is lemon balm, and this is the lemon balm. And I prefer to take shoots of that don't have any flowers on them. It's starting to flower, but I can still pull off the leaves to be using those. I'll also want to pick a little mint for garnishes, and lemon verbena. So far I have 3 lemon herbs that I have used in what we're cooking, and this is the lemon verbena. And again, I'll just take the top shoots, and that should divide. This is where another top shoot was taken off a couple weeks ago, probably 3 weeks ago, and you can see that it divided itself, and now I have 4 shoots where there was just 1. So by taking off these shoots, you often get more shoots to pick later. This is the fennel that's starting to go to seed. We can save the seeds of that when it does seed. I may want to put a paper bag over them as they start to go to seed in order to catch the seeds and not have them all just drop right here on the ground. That's also true of the cilantro. If I decided I wanted to save some of the seeds, which are coriander, and coriander is another thing I'll be using, and I'm using the coriander that I dried last year. Right now these little seeds are quite green, but when they start to turn brown, if I put a paper bag over that, it will help me collect the seed later on for use in the kitchen. Last year I collected it when it had turned fully brown, and then I put it in my oven, a very, very low oven, for 10 or 15 minutes just to make sure there wasn't anything alive in there besides the coriander seeds, so that it would keep a little bit longer. It was basically pasteurizing it so it would last. We could still pick chives. I did not happen to use those today in the salad I made, but I did put in some parsley and some dill from the vegetable garden, as well as a little of the lovage that we're still picking down there. Again, it's nice to be in the herb garden. One of the nice things you can do if you are invited to somebody's house and you really don't have anything to take, if it's a last-minute invitation, is just pick a nice little bouquet of herbs. They're often appreciated, especially if they're the culinary herbs. Mint, lemon balm, various thymes, basil, rosemary. There are so many of them, and it makes a beautiful bouquet to give to someone, especially if they're a cook and enjoy using them. They can dry them then for use later. Now let's move over to the perennial garden and see what's going on there. Here in the perennial garden we have lots of color going on, and lots of pollinators and butterflies have been flying around, which makes it really nice to work outside these days. These are annual poppies, and the ones over here are in bloom, the pink blooms. These are annuals, and they reseed themselves. They're a reseeding annual. And these are ones that have already bloomed. This is a bud that will bloom. And they reseed with abandon in an area, and if they get too thick, you actually need to thin them out. But unlike the oriental poppies, these, when they go to seed or form seed, they'll form seed in this pod at the top. The pod will be open at the top. There will be little holes around this top little ring, and you can save the seeds. So I let these stay here and turn brown, and then I'll be able to save the seeds, and then I can share them with other people or plant them in a different area. I really like them popping up all over. They add a lot of color, and this fluffy pink I do like, so I keep them going. Again, they're very easy to take out if they start growing in a place where you don't want them. Daylilies are in bloom. Each bloom lasts a day. They aren't particularly good for cut flowers, but they're really pretty in the garden. This one is an apricot with a red eye ring and a yellow center. You'll notice to cover up the dyed back bulb foliage, daffodil foliage, I've added the pineapple lily, which hasn't bloomed yet, but probably will in another 4 or 5 weeks. I have pineapple sage here, and that too will put on a nice red bloom later on. This is bee balm, and if you really want to see butterflies, plant some bee balm. It comes in various shades of red and purple. The wild one, which is a native plant, is kind of a paler shade of purple. This was one I got through a garden center, and it has been divided and spread throughout my garden in different places, and the butterflies love it. It's a butterfly magnet. I have a morning glory on the pole, but being that it's midday and not morning, all of my little flowers, purple flowers, have closed up. Morning glories are really nice to plant, but you have to be willing to go through and pull out any of the seedlings, because it will seed all over your garden and not just stay in one place. So I tend to take a walk about once a week around the plant and pull up anything that's gone to seed on that one or started to form seedlings. I don't want it to take over the whole garden, and it is capable of doing so. Every few years I get tired of doing it, pull out all of it, and then decide I really did like it after all and plant another one. It's very easy to grow here. Again, daylilies right now can add a lot of color. This is called a red stella, and it has a yellow eye zone. Each of the stalks has a number of different blooms, buds on it, so even though it lasts but one day, it will last. And the blooms usually are self-cleaning, meaning that the old flowers will fall off and fall away from the new ones. Chrysanthemums are, remember we cut those back until early July, and now it's late July, and you can see that they're starting to form buds. Each place that we cut made several new stems, and we'll have more buds on that. That keeps the plant low. Often if you have chrysanthemums that make it through the winter, they become very tall and leggy and have very few blooms at the ends of their long leggy stalks. That's why we clip them back. We have honeybees now on the stokesia. This is a yellow one. It is often in blue and purple. Lemongrass is back here, and I need to keep that one well watered if we don't get rain. So far the humidity has done it pretty well. And I have more lemongrass over here. This is heliotrope, which again is an herb, but it wasn't doing well in my herb garden. It needed a little more sun, so I moved the heliotrope over here. It is a very pretty little plant, and if you get down to the ground and smell it, or if you pick some of the blossoms when it comes out with larger blossoms, it smells kind of like baby powder. It has a very sweet aroma. The larkspur continues to bloom, and it is starting to form seed pods. Again, once those seed pods dry, I'll be able to open them and save the seeds or move it to another area of my garden to scatter and have more larkspur next year. Undoubtedly, both the poppies and the larkspur will spread themselves around in the areas where they're growing. We have some phlox that has started to bloom along with the daylilies, and we still have those summer allium, which are expanding a bit. I don't think they're going to make the 6 to 8 inches promised in the catalog, but they still add a lot of color up there as a tower over everything else. This is a Gerbera daisy that I got as a gift last year, and I saved it over the winter. I just popped it into a pot and brought it in the house. It didn't look great, but it did stay alive. And so I put it out again this summer, and lo and behold, it has not only got some blooms, but it's making a new plant along the side. I'll be sure to take it in again this year and probably divide it when I do, and maybe next year we'll have 2 of them. It's doing really well. With this humid weather that is just sticky and hot, mildew is really a problem. And I've mixed my solution of half water and half milk. Any kind of milk will do. And I can spray the foliage of various plants that are prone to mildew. This seems to work about as well as many of the chemical sprays that you can get. And it's pretty much completely non-toxic. You may have a little sour milk smell occasionally, but you won't have mildew. And things like peonies can be very prone to mildew. And mildew would form a white substance on the foliage. It looks pretty unsightly. Often then it'll turn dark brown or black and just generally looks unsightly. Again, the phlox over here is one called Blue Paradise. Right now it looks a little pink, but under different light conditions it can look very blue. Early in the morning I come out and it looks quite blue. It's interesting how the color changes with the light conditions. Again, we have some buds on the Black-Eyed Susans starting, and the Celosa, which is an annual, is really starting to put out some blooms all along its stalk. It's a nice bright one to plant. Daylilies again. This one is called Gentle Shepherd, and it's a white, and it doesn't usually fall off as neatly as some of the others, so I sometimes give it a helping hand if I want the garden to look neat. This is a hummingbird feeder. It has the sugar water in it. I have another one up there, and I'm noticing my water's getting cloudy, and that tells me that I probably won't have any hummingbirds visit that feeder until I change the fluid that's in it. I use 1/4 sugar to 4 parts water, and or a little more. It's kind of a solution that's approximate, and you can add a little more sugar if you wish. Right now I'm having the hummingbirds visit some of the plants, particularly the phlox. They really seem to like that better than the solution that I can provide. They do prefer the flowers. My rose bush has been fertilized, and hopefully we've got a lot of buds on it, and so we'll hope for a good August flush of bloom. Roses around here tend to bloom in June, a major amount. Then they take a little rest during the heat of the summer, only to come back in August if you've fertilized them and kept them well watered. A rose needs about 5 gallons a week. So that's a good estimate. That would be about 2.5 of my 2-gallon watering cans per week. So twice a week I should be dumping at least that much on it, unless we get sufficient rain to cover it. It looks like I won't get any more blooms on the hydrangea that's back here. This is about its 4th year in this position, still no bloom. I believe it is going to be leaving the garden. I don't really want to put up with something that doesn't ever provide any bloom. It's nice foliage, but I would like to get some flowers since it is a flower garden. I'm going to go back here. The lilies, most of the Asiatic lilies, have finished blooming, and I just cut off the tops. These would go to seed and seed all over the garden, potentially, but it would take a very long time to get a blooming size stalk from them. So I'm going to let the energy go back into the bulb, and then the bulb will make more flowers for me next year. That's true with many of the bulbs. We did it with our spring flowering bulbs, cut off the old flowering stem and let the energy go into the lower portions. Asters are starting to branch out, but they won't bloom again for probably another month or so. There we have a butterfly on the echinacea back here, and a couple dragonflies too, as well as some honeybees. The poppy foliage dies back, and I have another one on the other side of the garden that's in the process of dying back. Once it dies back, I usually cut it way back, and I've cut off the bloom pieces that I want to save for decorations, and I needed some color in this area. So I'm going to put a hanging basket here, only it isn't a hanging basket anymore. It is a hanging basket container, and I'm setting it on top of a old stem of a bird bath. The top of the bird bath broke, and what do you do when you're left with the bottom? You use it as a plant stand. However, experience has taught me that the plant will fall off if I don't hold it on in some way. So I just have an aluminum bar that I'm pounding down in the middle, and this will keep it from falling off. I will need to remember to water this and water it regularly if I want to keep it blooming, and that is my plan, because we needed a little color in this area. I also want to remember to water any other annuals and any perennials that start to droop. Hopefully we will continue to get some good rainfall here, and things will continue to bloom. This year has been great. Last year we actually did not do a late July program because everything was so dry that everything had stopped blooming. This year it's really refreshing to see it. The plant back here is called Gallium. It's a relative of woodruff somewhere along the line, and it looks a lot like baby's breath. In my acid soil, baby's breath really does not do well at all, but it makes a great filler for arrangements, and this will take its place in that function. I have a few foxglove here, which I'll let go to seed because I really would like to see more foxglove throughout the garden. Another rose back here has also been deadheaded, and it too is putting on more blooms and many more buds, so that we will get a nice show in August. Coral bells have bloomed from June on. Once a stem gets really old and brown at the bottom, I do take it out and add it to the compost, but by and large I leave them in. The little purple allium that we have here is just about finished, and I really don't want that to go to seed. It will, and it can become a real nuisance. So these are ones that I will take off and probably put in the trash rather than the compost. Otherwise, it'll come up all over the garden. These are just things that you learn as you go along and have to pull out repeatedly. Again, in the back I have echinacea, more of the Verbena bonariensis, and Heliopsis is adding a nice yellow color in the back. And again, the echinacea is another butterfly plant. There's almost always one of the fritillaries on it. I've had a monarch or two in the garden this year, yellow tiger swallowtails, black swallowtails, but most frequently it's the fritillaries that are here tasting the nectar from the flowers. Now let's head over to the vegetable garden and see what we can pick there. down in the vegetable garden, and everything's growing pretty well. I got things in a little late due to weather conditions, but things have kind of taken off. I have some nice cabbage white butterfly, which is making an appearance. And though it's nice to have butterflies, that particular one I'm not a big fan of because it's the one that is responsible for the little green worms that are on cabbage, broccoli, and kale, unless you do something about it. And I use an organic insecticide that is safe for use even a day before harvest, and that's pretty safe. It is a bacterial type product that attacks the caterpillars and not people. It is specific for the caterpillars. However, I won't use it until after dark, just in case it's toxic to bees, and I don't want to destroy any pollinators. So it's best if you're going to spray something to wait until evening to do your spraying. And be sure to read the label and know what you're spraying. If you're near water, particularly, some sprays that are quite safe are still toxic to aquatic life. So if you have a pond nearby, you don't want to be doing much of any spraying nearby. Again, wait until evening. The pollinators are not there late in the evening, and that's the time to do any spraying that you need to do. I try to do a little, but again, I don't like my vegetarian vegetables to have extra wildlife in them, so I do spray some. Strawberries are finished. I've removed all the netting, and now I need, at some point before a rain, to give it a good sprinkle of organic all-purpose fertilizer, and then we'll watch as the strawberries put out runners, which are the forerunners of next year's fruiting plants. I'll probably have to make the row a little smaller after that happens because they tend to go in all directions. But I will wait to do that until we are going to get some rain and something that will soak in the fertilizer really well. Beans are starting. I've already picked a few of the green beans, which are right here. There's a few. I like to pick them when they're nice and young and tender, about this size. Those are the fancy green beans if you buy them, but if you grow them, you can have them. Beans need to be picked about every day to every other day while they are bearing. And I have green ones, and I planted some lima beans in here, which did not germinate particularly well. And then we have yellow beans down here, which are also ready to pick. And these will need picking every few days in order to keep bearing. The more you pick, the more you have. And I should have plenty on these for meals and probably to put a few in the freezer as well. And again, you just snap them off with your fingers, and usually I would have a bag or a box or something to put them in as we go along. I have broccoli, and I've already cut the main heads of my broccoli. It hasn't done great this year, but it is starting to put out some secondary shoots. And like the flowers that we cut back in order to make more shoots, you can do that with broccoli. With cauliflower, you basically have one fruit or one cauliflower per plant. With broccoli, sometimes the best broccoli comes late in the season from these side shoots. And some of the side shoots can get quite good sized. So always leave your broccoli in the garden, and you'll continue to get broccoli well into fall. I've even picked broccoli as late as Thanksgiving, so it can really produce. We now have plenty of lettuce to pick, all different colors of green and red or burgundy. This is the perpetual spinach, which is actually it's a chard relative, but it's quite mild and can be used like spinach. The nice thing about it is if you pick just the outside leaves, it keeps forming leaves, and that too will last quite a long time. My beets, especially my second planting of beets, is up and growing and doing really quite well. Flowers, I have zinnias about ready to bloom, and a lot of calendulas as well. In open spaces in the garden, I've been putting in more lettuce. little seedlings of lettuce. The chard we planted 2 weeks ago is well up. I'm sorry, it's not chard, it was kale. But I've been planting, and it's necessary to keep these young plants wet. And of course, now that it's hot and stopped raining a little bit, we need to get out here with the watering can as often as a couple times a day until these germinate and come up in order to get a crop to start. They grow very well in the cooler weather of fall, but if you don't start them now, you won't have plants to grow into the fall. So it's necessary to start now. In another couple weeks, I'll be trying to find a spot where I've taken something out to put in spinach. And that too is a fall crop. Sometimes I get a good crop of spinach, but it needs to go in about early to mid-August in order to mature a little later. And then you hope that the temperatures are cooler into September. Fall crops take longer than spring crops as temperatures and the sun is actually, now the daylight hours are waning, so you get less sun than you do in the hot midsummer. It's increasing up until June, and then end of June, and then the sun actually decreases on the garden after that. So it takes longer for those fall crops to mature. That's why you have to plant them early. Garlic. Now my beans, and got plenty of garlic here, and we need to start testing it to see if it's ready to harvest. And when you harvest garlic is kind of critical if you want to store it over the winter. And I loosen it up and pull it out. You want to make sure that the garlic has large enough cloves, and you want them to be still tight against the stem. If you wait too long until all the leaves have gone brown, actually we could probably wait until even these are brown up at the top. They're green right now, but they're starting to brown. So within the next couple weeks, the garlic will all be ready to harvest. And you want the cloves to be tight against the stalk because then it will keep better. As the garlic matures, the cloves pull away from the stalk. And if you do harvest any that are that way, that's the garlic that you want to use first because it will not store through the winter as well when it's pulled away from the stalk. Once this garlic has reached the point where I wish to harvest it, I will come and dig it, and that may not be for a couple more weeks, but then it goes into my garden shed and stays there for several more weeks to cure. After that, I'll cut off the roots and cut off the stems, put it in a bag, and then put it in a cool spot, and it will last probably until about next March or April. I can start using the garlic right now. Now that I've depleted my supply from last year, at any time I can actually come out and pick them and start using them. But if you want it to keep, you do need to go through that curing process in an airy, cool spot. I'm still picking a few of the snow peas. They've been amazing this year in that we've had enough of the rain and we had a few cool times, and here we're picking a few more. Every few days I'm picking a few. The dill is starting to go to seed and would be great to go in pickles, anything pickled right now, or we can just let it go to seed and then it'll come up next year. In between these onions and the garlic, knowing that the garlic was going to be coming out, I did plant a few winter squash, and we'll see if it matures in time to get some winter squash. Where the peas have finished, I've taken down the nets and planted, again, a few more crops, which I will need to keep watered. A little more lettuce and some radishes for fall crops. I have the lancenato kale that I can use anytime along with the regular leafy kale. And again, we have plenty of vegetables from the garden right now to keep us in vegetables for the rest of the summer. Looking forward to eggplant, tomatoes, and peppers a little further down the road. Cilantro's going to seed. It's actually, I love having the flowers in the garden. The pollinators like those too. And we'll have the seeds for either coriander or to go to seed and spread. Calendulas are one of the flowers I always plant. And these are edible flowers, actually. You can use the petals as a saffron substitute in things, and they just look very pretty in a salad to spread a few of the petals. Generally, when you eat flowers, you take off the green part at the base of the flower and the center and just use the petals. Now let's head back to the shade garden and get out of the sun. Still a few plants to bloom out here. I have a blue oat grass that's just starting to bud. That'll be a nice fall plant as time goes on. And I also have a wild white turtlehead plant, which hopefully will have a few blossoms on it. Another shade lover, but a native plant nonetheless. I will continue to fertilize any container plants every 2 weeks with a liquid fertilizer, and I will also try to remember to use my deer spray about every 2 weeks, or one night of not having deer spray and having the deer invade can mean a whole hosta garden completely destroyed. So it's important, especially if you're going to be gone, to make sure that you've used your deer spray to thwart them coming into the yard in the first place. Once they get the idea, and I've been spraying since early spring, they kind of avoid the place because they know there's nothing good to eat in that yard. At least that's what I want them to think. I'll also be fertilizing my water plants. Those I fertilize with pellets, especially made for water plants, and I'll do that once a month as they continue to mature. I still haven't gotten any fish. I hope to get some in a couple weeks. But if you do have fish, remember that they need to eat more often when it's hot. The fish's metabolism is governed by the air temperature and water temperature. And in the hot weather, they tend to be very, very hungry. When it cools down in the fall, they eat very little. And in the winter, you don't feed them at all because they're moving in very slow motion. But they'll be moving rapidly in warmer water and be very hungry. So if you do have fish, be sure that you feed them sometimes even several times a day. Throw in a handful of the fish food. The next thing I'm going to do is some other winter planting, and this is one I've planted with cabbage. And I did the same thing as I do in the spring. I used the water-filled container below, and I put the lid over the plants. I put my potting soil for seedlings. It was special seedling mix, which is very fine, into the plant cells here. Planted my cabbage seeds, and then I will just put it in the shed. And I've also done the same thing with some broccoli. I don't know if we'll get any or not, but it's worth a try. These were some of the miniature cabbages, so I figured it was worth a shot. The other thing I want to do is take some cuttings, and these are called softwood cuttings. And I've used Clithera, which is one of the shrubs that I have here in the shade. And it's right for the cutting when you can break off the branch and it snaps cleanly. If it offers a lot of resistance, then it's hardened off too much. And if it just bends, then it's too young. So you want plants that are somewhere between hardened off and very young. I guess it's kind of a tricky thing, and I try various years. Sometimes I have more success than others. These seem to snap off nicely, and what I'll do is just use a knife to scrape some of the base of it. I'll dip it in water and then cover the area where I kind of shaved the stem in potting or in rooting hormone. This is a rooting powder. It's a hormone that helps plants grow and encourage them to form roots. And I've got a 6-pack here that I've filled with a mixture of perlite, which is very, very light, and potting soil. And it's a mixture of about 60% perlite to 40% potting soil. And I will just firm these cuttings into the mixture. And I have them sitting in a plastic tray. And I'll continue some of the others. There are other shrubs that you can try. You can try mountain laurel, calmia. You want only a few of the top leaves left. And I'll cut this one a little more. Where you've injured the stem is where the roots should be growing. Again, dip it in water and then coat that area with the rooting powder. Then use a pencil to pop it into the pot. These will be watered from the bottom. I'll just put water, keep water in that bottom tray. And I'll put the whole thing, when I get it full, in a big plastic bag. And then I'll put it in the garden shed, which is not real sunny. It's partially sunny, I'd say. It gets a bit of morning sun. And we'll leave it there until they have hopefully rooted. And we'll be able to see some roots coming out through the bottom of this container of 6-packs. At that point, if they form a good root ball, we can put them into pots with a higher percentage of soil and less perlite. Grow them on there for a little while, and then ultimately plant them into the garden and mulch them for the winter to grow into shrubs later on. These are called softwood cuttings. The other thing we want to do with them, and I think I put my clippers down, or scissors. I'll use scissors this time. So I want to cut off half the leaf so that again, make sure it's in. You can do this with deciduous azaleas, mountain laurel, clithera, which I have done. I imagine any type of willow or pussy willow would grow the same way. There are lists online of plants that you can root from softwood cuttings. And that's what we're doing. So you can look up, and if you have plants that you would like to make more, hydrangeas are another one. Some of the hydrangeas can be rooted this way. Again, you want to make sure they're in tight. And we'll keep it going there. Now, let's go inside and see what we can do with some of the herbs that we picked from the garden. A couple weeks ago, we picked these garlic scapes, which have been in my refrigerator, and it's time to preserve them. I've been using them, cutting them up finely and using them in dishes, but it's time to do something longer term. And in order to use them, I have cut off the bloom stalk and just discarded that, and then used the rest of it. And I'm going to start by making some garlic scape hummus. And I'll just cut up pieces of garlic scape. And again, it gets a little tough near the end, so we won't use that part. And I'll use a can of garbanzo beans. And 4 or 5 stalks of the washed garlic scapes. And then I'm going to add the juice of half a lemon. And I'm going to grind this until it's want it pretty finely chopped. Scrape it down one more time. And add 1/3 of a cup of olive oil. Or however much you want to get it to the consistency that you want. This can be spread on bread, mixed with pasta. Probably want to add some salt and pepper. Again, I'm going to add that to taste. If you want to freeze this, you can freeze it. It freezes well if you don't use it all right away. Or you can put it in, if you want to just use small bits of it and take it out gradually, just put it into an ice cube tray. Put that in the freezer. Then once it's frozen, you can put it into, take it out of the ice cube tray and put it into plastic bags. Label it well and put it back in the freezer. However you wish to use it. We'll have a mild garlic flavor. Move that out of the way. And the next thing we want to do are pickle some garlic scapes. I have not done this, but I've heard that they're very good. And what I did is I already in sterilized jars, and I did sterilize them in my dishwasher. I put the garlic scapes in. Now these have been in the refrigerator, so I'm heating up some water so that when I add the hot brine, jars won't break. I'm using 1.5 cups of water, 1.5 cups of cider vinegar. And what I'm making is a brine. 2 tablespoons of kosher salt and 2 tablespoons of sugar, and I'm using raw sugar in this one. And we're going to bring that to a boil and till the sugar in my water's hot. We want the sugar and the salt to dissolve in this mixture. We'll stir it around a little bit. This is the pickling brine that we'll be using. And we're going to add some spices to the individual jars, pint jars. We're going to add 1/4 cup of hot pepper to each one. These are crushed red pepper. 1/4 cup of coriander. Remember, that's the seed of the cilantro. A 1/2 teaspoon of mustard seed. And a 1/2 teaspoon of peppercorns. Just black peppercorns. Give this a little spice. The salt is in our brine, and we'll wait for that brine to come to a boil. The brine is now boiling, and what I'm going to do is put some hot water in the pan around these so that they won't be too shocked by the boiling brine. And then I will add the brine. Ooh, vinegar. To the jar with all the garlic scapes and spices. This is a lot like canning, but these are not going to be processed, so we will not be able to store them on the shelf. They'll need to be stored in the refrigerator. I'll leave a bit of headroom and be sure to push any of the garlic scapes down into the brine as much as possible. I'd like to have them covered. Then I'll use a canning jar lid, a fresh one. As I said, even though we are not canning them, these will probably seal. That doesn't mean that they are safe without refrigeration. I'll wipe off with a damp paper towel, put on the lid, and screw on the screw band. Tighten it down, and they again will probably seal. We're going to just put those aside and let them cool, and we'll do the same with the other jar. Then I'll put these in the refrigerator when they have cooled and wait 6 weeks before opening them, at which point the pickling fluid should have done its job and pickled our garlic scapes. Again, I'd like to see that they're all under water. They tend to pop out a little bit. The unprocessed pickled items can be kept. Often you can make quick pickles this way. Again, the jars may well seal, but they are not processed, so you cannot store them at room temperature. They need to be refrigerated until you consume them. Now we've done our processing for the day and our preservation. I'm going to make some preparations for a tea in the garden. Having a few friends over perhaps, or maybe a whole lot of friends over. And I'm going to make a few tea sandwiches here of different kinds. And I'm using thin sliced bread. I like to use whole wheat and white, but I could not get any of the whole wheat thin sliced. If you're making tea sandwiches ahead, you want to spread them with some butter. This keeps the bread from getting soggy if you're going to store them in the refrigerator. We're going to eat ours pretty much right away, but nonetheless, I'll put a very thin coat on. And I'm using a butter-oil combination. But you could use butter, and today it would melt very easily and be of spreading consistency. We just want a little bit on them. I'm going to make 3 kinds, and we'll cut them in 3 different shapes too. The first one I'm going to spread with a mixture of butter, which is at room temperature, and blue cheese. And I have a little roast beef to put on that one. Very thinly sliced. And this can be leftover or purchased roast beef to make a sandwich. And we'll cover it with the top. And then on all of these, I'm going to be cutting off the crust. Tea sandwiches are really fun to make, and you can use so many different things in them. And here's a plate here. Put a few of these out on it. The next one I'm going to make is with an egg salad mixture, and this is just an egg salad I've made. Added a little mustard. I've chopped the eggs really fine, so it's a very fine egg salad mixture. I'm going to do two variations on this one. You could use ham and cheese. You could even use peanut butter and jelly. Cut them in fancy shapes and cut off the crusts, and you have fine tea sandwiches. Whatever the filling. And I'm going to do both of these with a slight variation. It's almost an egg butter. There is some melted butter, or not melted butter, just softened butter, a little mayonnaise, dry mustard or Dijon mustard, and very finely chopped egg, all blended together to make my egg spread. One of these I'm going to do asparagus, and this has been blanched, otherwise cooked slightly, and then chilled quickly. And I did it in the microwave. And we'll put the top on, and then again cut off the edges. This time I'll cut the asparagus off too. The cook can eat the leftovers. And these I think we'll do in squares. And then the last one, I thought if you can use asparagus, why not green beans? So some of those tender little green beans are going to be used the same way. And I'll just line them up, and again, these are just blanched, very briefly heated. It's nice to use herb spreads. Just mix some of the chopped herbs with butter for the tea sandwiches, or in with a little mayonnaise. There's so many different variations you can do and come up with some interesting selections. And again, we'll cut off the edges. And let's see if we can do some diamonds with this one. There we are. We have to stack these a little bit. Rearrange a little bit here. And we have one more to do, and that is even easier. These are the greatest. They're mini phyllo shells. They can be used for dessert, they can be used for hors d'oeuvres, and they're really nice to have. They're not inexpensive, but if your time is more important, they work really well. They're little phyllo shells. And we'll take out maybe 6 of them. They come 18 to a package. They can be stored in the freezer or at room temperature if you're going to use them right away, but they do stay in the freezer for quite a long time. You can add pudding and fruit to these, or you can add any type of hors d'oeuvre type filling. And I'm going to add chicken salad. This chicken salad, I put some herbs in. I used some of the parsley, a little lovage, and I'm going to just fill each cup with some chicken salad. Very easy to do, and you can also buy, I had some leftover chicken, cooked chicken, but you could also buy your chicken salad and then add your own herbs to make it your own. Again, with this one I use parsley, a little lovage, and a little scallion. And now we can have fun with some garnishes. Again, herbs are very good for that. These are borage flowers, and borage is one of the herbs that tastes kind of like cucumbers, and I thought they're edible flowers, and they're really kind of pretty, but they look really nice on topping each of these little chicken salad cups. The green part comes off very easily, and you don't put that with it, just the flower part, and they are completely edible. Now, I also prepared some sweets, and these are scones made with the 3 lemon herbs, and you could add the herbs 2 teaspoons each of the lemon thyme, the lemon verbena, that's mint, and lemon balm you would add. I have a little mint here. And if you remember the bee balm or Monarda, that is another, it's popular with the bees, but it's also an edible flower. And I added that to just a plain pound cake mix. So I have bee balm pound cake, that's the little red flecks are those bee balm flowers. And I added, the pound cake recipe had lemon juice in it, and I added about 1/2 cup of chopped bee balm flowers to my recipe, and I baked the recipe in 4 small pans instead of 1 large one. Again, this is just a rich scone recipe, and I added a teaspoon each of those 3 herbs. So now we're ready to take our little plate out and have some tea in the garden. I'll see you there. It's a hot day, so it's time to stop working outside or inside and have a nice little tea in the garden. Even though it's hot, it's a good time to have some iced tea and to enjoy a few sweet and savory treats before the evening dinner hour. I'm Liz Davey, and you've been watching A Walk in the Garden on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television. We'll see you next time when I go for another walk in the garden.